So tonight we're talking about layoffs and dismissing employees. So step one is employment at will and exceptions. So will somebody explain employment at will and the exceptions?
I can do that.
Okay.
So most states have an employment at will guideline that basically means that any employee can be fired at any time. Any employer can fire somebody at any time for any reason. However, that is kind of clouded by the three different kind of statutes that most of the litigation falls under, and that is the first one is the implied consent that if you've been, which basically says if you've been implying to an employee that they will continue to have a job with you, and then suddenly you fire them, they have grounds to come after you for violation of that implied consent. So if you're saying, so like in our discussion tonight, Terry's a good example of that. He's been getting great reviews month after month or year after year because nobody's spoken up to actually say he needs to be dismissed. And so then to fire him right off the bat without any indication will kind of violate that implied consent. And then the next one is fair treatment under the law, which, let me get to the reading on that one. Just close that out.
So it's the breach of implied covenant in good faith and fair dealing. Wow.
Right. So that's saying that you're firing somebody because you don't want to do what you told them they would do or what they're entitled to. A good example would be somebody who is taking sick leave for whatever reason, and you don't want to pay them sick leave while they're out, so you just fire them in the meantime, and that takes that is that breach of implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing. And then the last one that you can't fire somebody for is because you're, and let's see, where is it? Violates public policy. So if you're asking somebody to do something that's against the law and they refuse to, that is not grounds to fire them. So if they are, and there's other protections, whistleblower exception. It means that if somebody comes to their employer and says we are causing problem X and it's having these implications on society, we need to do something about it, and they fire them for that. That's that's against the law, and they would win the lawsuit. Employee is fired for reporting illegal or harmful activity. And then it talks about, also there's some other things in about notice requirements that there are some states that comply with the WARN Act, which means that you have to give employees 60-day written notice for layoffs. That only affects companies of 100 or more full-time employees, and that work 4,000 hours per week total per the company.
Wow, that was like a amazing summary of the reading.
Yes, thank you.
Very good.
If someone watching this video hasn't read that Harvard case study on it, you don't need to know.
Really?
Hasha.
Well done.
Well, thank you.
I found interesting is in the violation of public policy, it talks about serving on jury duty, and it made me think about it because I was like, who would fire somebody for having to go on jury duty when they don't have a choice? And I was thinking about it, and I'm like, well, some cases last months, months and months, and so they lose them for that long. And so it was interesting to think about that.
Yeah, that's a good point. We had a guy that I worked with that was on a pretty sick murder case that he was the jury foreman for I think 3.5 or 4 months. And it wasn't even in town. He had to go to federal court, so he had to go 2 hours away to another city for the trial. And he was gone for about 3 months. And we paid him his wages. That's our hospital policy, is you actually get your full wages the whole time that you're out.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's nice.
Yeah,
Do
it's
you
actually
get
really
paid on
nice.
jury duty by the state or the government?
Say that again.
Do you get paid to be on jury duty?
You get a small stipend. It's a couple bucks a day.
Yeah, it's very negligible. It's
And
It's like food
they're supposed to reimburse miles traveled as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so it says discrimination statutes. Don't forget about the anti-discrimination statutes we covered previously. So Title VII, that covers race, national origin, gender, and religion. The Americans with Disabilities Act, and the Age Discrimination and Employment Act. Why are those important? Why are those important, Kiwi, to keep in mind?
Well, it's this actually. I had this conversation with my mother just the other week. She told me about, well, this is probably 15, 20 years back. She was actually fired by her employee, and he actually said the words, "I just need somebody younger." When
Oh,
he, I turned to her and said, "You know, you actually could have owned that dentist office. You would have been rich beyond belief." She's like, "Yeah, just it worked out for the best." And I was blown away. But
That wasn't
so
recently.
there's no, that was like 15, 20 years ago, but it was still well within the statutes that exist today. So
yeah.
I mean, if she'd have gone to a lawyer, they'd have been drooling the second she told him her case, and they'd have won without even going to court.
Huh.
And because he said it in front of the rest of the office staff.
What?
Yeah, it was just really stupid on his end, but
so
he got away with it because she didn't sue.
we need to know these so we don't look like that guy.
Yes, exactly. That even though it's a right to work state, you don't have 100% right to fire somebody. You need to
You just
you
say
need to
you
make
don't
sure you're
have a
within your
reason.
means.
Yeah. It's better not to have a reason than to have that reason.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
Stupid.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yes. So knowing what are legitimate reasons for firing somebody. There you go.
Perfect. So, what should the managers do? So first, we're going to talk about the financial obligations. What impact does Terry and Phil have on the company's bottom line? And then, what obligations does the manager have to the company based on that information?
So I feel like they're dragging it down if you're being paid as a full contributor but you're not contributing, then they could be using that money towards a more well-rounded employee, someone that has the technical skills.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand why they can't just be transferred to another department. If they have strengths, I'm not sure about Terry, but it sounds like Phil has other strengths. He's a people person and a good liaison. They might have another department that's not so technical that has more of a need for that, so that the company's still valuing his time and input. And just I don't know why that was never brought up, or if just because she was a project manager that was just her emphasis was her department. But
Mm-hmm. And
I
and
think
I agree with you on that one. I think maybe she's just a little too close to the scene or something, that she's just not seeing that he could be used somewhere else. What were you going to say, Keith?
well, I was gonna say it may be that everybody knows who Phil is if he's been there long enough and nobody wants him.
That's true.
I could see that more with Terry, where he was just useless. But I mean, they did talk about things that they liked about him. I don't. You would think in a big enough corporation like that that they would need some of those skills applied somewhere. I mean, I'm not sure if the positions are already filled, but
But the other thing to keep in mind from the reading is they only make about 300 grand a year, the company, in profit. So they're not doing great. So they might be leaning down instead of adding positions. There really might not be any place to put either one of these guys.
well, especially with them assigned to this team, it's just dragging down their numbers. If everyone else is having to work 80 hours a week
Yeah.
and wants to work 80 hours a week, then there's a lot to be done.
So,
Well, and-
go ahead.
Covered it all. So it
What?
says, you guys just pretty much covered it all. So it says, according to the manager, Terry makes no contribution, so all of his salary and benefits are pure cost. In a company that only makes $300,000 in a year, Bill seems to be less of a financial liability. And I'm thinking that they're saying that because he does have the customer service skills. Is what I'm thinking.
But
Um,
Go ahead, Brian.
no, that's okay. They both, if that's what it is, regardless of what they decide, they both need to be put on those PIP programs that they talked about.
Hmm.
You can't. That's what their policy was. You can't just go straight. You know how? Who was it? Phil. Somebody had a problem with Phil.
Yeah, it
And
was
so you
the
just wanted him to be.
The VP.
Yeah. So you just wanted him to be fired, but that's not how the company seems to be doing things. So they
I
still have
also
to go through the rules.
I also think that it's ridiculous that you have a program like PIP involved, but then it has such a negative connotation to it. You think that
Right.
with performance plans like that, that they would be something like, okay, yeah, this is your last chance, but we obviously want to give you a chance, and instead that you work hand in hand with HR so that it's like a more fine, I don't
it's
know,
more
tuned
of
version to
crossing the
cover your
lines.
bases. Yeah, it's almost like they're just trying to cover their bums so they don't deal with lawsuits or unemployment stuff. I remember from when I was an assistant manager at Plato's Closet, I had to have a ton of documentation for if I ever needed to fire someone because when they applied for unemployment, the company themselves pays that, and I didn't realize that before when everyone's on
oh,
unemployment.
they do.
Yes.
Yeah, and that was new to me working in the industry. So in order to protect ourselves, you have to have the documentation there. And so I was blown away that this would be really constructive tool is really being used as a legality to cover themselves to not have to foot out the cost and hire somebody else.
Mhm.
Obviously it's just a portion, it's not their full pay, but it's still a burden on the company since they still have to replace you
Right.
for
See, and
them.
that's one of the parts that I had a hard time with because um, I've had to put one person on a performance improvement plan. He didn't work out so well, but there was another guy that he didn't report to me, but he was just put on one about 4 months ago, and he has done a complete 180. He is one of the top performers now. Everybody wants him on the projects, and it's just been this incredible night and day difference. And so I that really bothered me that they use the performance improvement plan as like one of the initial steps to firing. So I'm like, that totally defeats the purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're misusing it completely. So as a manager, she needs to set goals that they can act that she can help them with, and provide them the tools to do that. Obviously, he was given the tools he needed, like whether through counseling or just some motivational pep talks. That guy was able to turn it around, and maybe Phil would be able to do the same. Terry, on the other hand, just I don't know. He'd be like the other guy. Maybe he just wouldn't make it.
I
So
think Terry's kind of a leech.
Yeah.
sadly.
Well, it's sad that they even get into positions like that from networking when you go through the interview process still and everyone says no.
Right.
Like if you go through 5 people and they all say no.
It's probably a good sign that you probably shouldn't be hired.
Yeah, it just sounds like an expensive mistake.
Yeah.
Well, and then at the end, like towards the end, it said that the company has a policy that if you're not promoted after 3 years, you're let go. And then Phil was still there after 6 years with no promotion, and so it's like at some point you have to cut the fat.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I also just feel like it's really poor management for, like, it also said that Phil felt like he deserved a promotion and that he should be in the workings for one. Like, the communication there for what management's expectations seemed to be slacking for, as well of a manager she thought she was, and she was so blunt. She prided herself on being really open and honest and having that good communication. If he has those expectations, that's kind of confusing as well as to who's dropping the ball then for the job description and following through on molding your people. Not that I'm saying that she was a bad manager by any means, but obviously there's a disconnect if he felt like he deserved a promotion and she's
Right.
thinking he's a 2.5. To me, that didn't add up either.
Right.
And that's in the reading she talks. She talks about, well, if people want to know their career path, they just come talk to me. But it's not something that she actually brings up in their performance evals. It's not
Well,
like,
I mean,
oh, well, Because if that's actually company policy, that if you don't get a promotion in 3 years, you get the axe. You would think that would be something in your performance evaluation every 6 months to go, what are you doing how can I help you move forward? What can I do to get you to that next level?
Well,
And
and just even the basic of him getting a 2.5, that's not leadership material. Like that's that's him thinking he's in the workings for something and he's actually failing miserably. Like that's a total
blindside.
disconnect. Yeah, that's just unfortunate.
Okay. The next topic
So you're
is
on
the
that.
legal obligation. Sorry, did somebody say something?
Oh, nope, just helping you find your place, but you found it. You're good.
Based on what we've learned about employment at will and exceptions, what legal obligations could the manager have to Terry and Phil, if any? And then it says in parentheses, Terry, possibility of implied contract age discrimination, and Phil, the possibility of, oh, I just gave you guys the answer. Oh well. Possibility of disability discrimination. You guys would have gotten there. It's okay.
Yeah, I kind of feel like we've talked a lot about this too, even if we haven't gone into the nitty-gritty of the particulars. But
Yeah, what do you guys think on the disability discrimination? Does he have a leg to stand on there or not?
for Phil,
For That's what I was curious on in reading that.
it would depend on how she wrote up the performance review, I think, for the 6 month turnaround. If his performance is based on him being out and so he wasn't there, then obviously that's not really a case,
Mhm.
They'd have to base it on the previous ones before he got sick.
Gotcha.
They would have to be caught that they couldn't let him go because he was sick, because that's obviously not part of the at will. But if it's based on, oh, he hasn't been here for the last 6 months, so he's been really crappy, well, that's not going to work for any type of legality there. So.
Okay. Right. Okay. Ethical obligations. What ethical obligations does the manager have to Terry and Phil, if any?
I would say, kind of going back to the conversation we just had, they're misusing the performance improvement plan, and so as the manager, if she's going to put them on a PIP, it needs to be with the goal of them improving, not with the goal of getting their foot halfway out the door. Ethically, that's where they need to be. To them, that's where she needs to be standing. Is okay. What can we actually do to make you improve and get to that stage?
I wonder if they have any training available and all these different. Like, I'm not sure about you guys for the reading for some of the B361, the operations management class. It's been, or maybe it's one of my other ones. Anyways, in a lot of the classes I've been doing, it really stresses the importance of continuing education and vigorous learning opportunities and educational institutions that employers should provide. And I wonder if the higher ups are so in love with Terry, what have we offered him any educational opportunities to learn coding? Obviously it's harder to do at work when people have to have their own deadlines. But if you want to keep them on the team and they're all chummy with the scuba diving and stuff, I wonder if there isn't any type of PIP that would involve in order, with you still working full time, you're going to be required to take so many online classes with this institution to get accredited for this particular program, so that we can see a little bit more from you for the team, kind of spread this workflow around. I just wondered why that wasn't part of it. And I'm not sure if that's an ethical obligation, but I just feel like in a management position, before I really felt like I'd be okay with letting someone go, I'd want to make sure that I put out resources, especially when they've been with the company for so many years. You get kind of sedentary and comfortable, and you have your livelihood all tied up into that. And so it's just something that came to my mind.
I think that's really important, because as you were saying that, I was thinking about how in a lot of companies now, that you are required to go back and get more education, whether it's just taking seminars or going to get your master's degree. It's really important in this day and age, because everybody else is learning, so you need to stay up with the crowd per se. So maybe offering him to go learn how to code would help him not only with the coding, but realize that the company actually cares. And then he will want to go further. Does that make sense?
I know they don't have like a lot of money to pay for it necessarily, but I don't know. They have all those, like, we learned about it a couple weeks ago, how they can offer like 52.50 for tax-free educational credits and stuff, right? Something like
Yeah.
that.
And
Yep.
I've been researching it, and there's like grants that companies can get if they're trying to further their um, people's education. So they can get grants to pay for it. So maybe they could do that.
Sorry, I know that's kind of a side note. But besides that, ethically, I feel like to the company, they can't just be paying freeloaders or people that aren't contributing. If your team is a technical team, that needs to be written into the job description so that future people getting hired onto, you're not going to run into the same problems. You have to run around the same merry-go-round trying to weed them out to have full contributors, like it needs to be a little bit more detailed. But to the company and to the other employees, it's not fair that they're having to foot the bill and share all the other work responsibilities.
Well, and I feel like with Terry, they almost need to set the bar at a certain place, because if he's not catching up to where everybody else is, if he's not able to program the way everybody else is, they should be able to, set the bar and say, look, Terry, we need you to be able to code it, this much stuff or in this particular language. And then if he says, I don't know that language, then they say, okay, you can either go learn the language or you need to go find somewhere else. Like, this is the bar that we need everybody set at. You need to learn this. You need to be able to have this kind of output. 'Cause they're not doing him any favors by just stringing him along. They need to tell him at what, they need to set the, put the carrot in front of him and say, if you reach this, you'll be fine. But
And that's hard though from the manager's standpoint in this situation, because he's the VP and the CEO's kind of pet. How do you, where he actually has no real threat other than you as the manager to do those things? I mean, you'd really have to get senior management on board and quit protecting him, I guess, because they think he's fine and dandy where he's at. It's almost like they're kind of happy just letting him leech off the company. But
well, I also feel like it's been some of the prior reviews with Rachel that set them up for such. Maybe they don't really understand the performance level that he's at. I don't feel like it necessarily needs to go straight into like a defensive thing. If all it needs is educating them, like, look, this is what we do on a day-to-day basis. Let me bring him in, and you can ask him what he's capable of doing. And if that's what he says he's capable of doing, then that's what we'll hold him accountable for. And then if he doesn't do it, then I guess I'm right. I just feel like if they really valued him as a friend and he is such a pet, then why they stick him in a position where he couldn't succeed unless they don't know what the job is either,
Which could be, there could be a major disconnect there.
God.
So her obligation to the company then is to inform them of what these guys' roles are and what they should be doing and what they, where they're lacking.
Yeah. What do you guys think the obligation to herself is as a manager? Do you think it's fair that she has a freeloader on her team?
No.
No,
Nope.
and I think that she has a lot to prove to herself too, with how quickly she got her management position from lead. That she really is a go-getter, and that they put her in that position for a reason.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. You guys already covered the company and the employees, so so it says Terry could be dangerous. Top management wants to retain. Has been given high scores in the past. Is it ethical to terminate out of the blue? And then for Phil, it says thinks he should get a promotion. His group has been rallying around him during his illness. How would terminating him impact morale of the rest of the employees?
I think we kind of talked about that slightly, but I think that there's a difference between caring about someone as a person and then protecting the profitability of your company and just the workload. And like I said, if your reason for firing him is because the last 6 months while he's been sick, he hasn't been performing well, then you're not going to have much of a case because he was technically on sick leave or whatever. But I mean, I don't think that any of these things have to happen overnight. I think that the PIP program should be used correctly, and I think that we all agreed with that.
Mhm. I agree.
So sorry, guys. My newborn son was just hiccuping and trying to burp and spit up all at the same time. We're laughing
Oh,
about it. It was the craziest sound I've heard in a while.
it's only cute when
My
they're
wife's
this
just behind.
small.
What's that?
I said it's only cute when they're this small, though.
Yes, only cute at that stage. That's right.
But it does
Yeah,
sound really cute
little.
that little.
Yeah, he's a whopping 5 days old. So
Oh,
Congratulations.
congratulations.
thanks. Sorry, don't mean to detract too much. Onward to the conversation. We can we can talk about my son after we're off air.
Okay.
I forgot we were on air.
Okay. Analysis of companies' HR practices. So, how well do you guys think the company in the case is doing with its HR practices in general? Do you think they're doing okay? Do they suck?
Well, I think we've already talked that we don't really respect the fact that HR is brought into PIPs only to cover their bums. I think that we want them to have a more active role in helping employees be successful.
Right.
And the PIP needs to be put in kind of further up the line than at the last minute.
Right.
Um,
Agreed.
I agree. What do you think about how they hire?
I think we agreed that we don't like the idea that 5 people can say no and they still get brought on. I also think they need a better job description so that if coding is so important and it's part of the team contribution, it needs to be in the job description so they don't run into the same problems.
Yeah, if they don't say it in the description, how are people supposed to know that they have to code?
Right.
How do they manage people and give them feedback?
I think
They
we talked
don't
about
do a
that.
very good job. HR says don't give them any praise and don't really give them any feedback whatsoever. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not, their whole stance on it isn't very good. They need
And
to have a better performance. I mean, performance reviews are every 6 months, but there's a lot of time in between, just like they've talked about with, say, Phil, where you do need follow-up from management and, either encouragement or, some action on their part to move people along. So they aren't very active.
totally agree.
Okay. Do you think that the employees get a clear picture from the company of how they are performing? We already
Not,
kind of discussed this. Not at all.
Did that.
Nope. Um, it asks what's the PIP for. I think
We've
it's
gone
supposed to be to help the employees, but I think that what it's turned out to be is a way to get them out the door.
Correct.
And we've already discussed, do you guys agree with the way the company uses PIPs? And all of us said no. What do you guys think they could do to change the PIP? Besides, like, somebody mentioned moving it up a little bit in the chain.
Well, we already even talked about how we feel like the concept is being implemented poorly, that it should be, sorry, I'm tired. It should be for actually helping improve and not as just a legality way to cross all your T's and dot your I's before you boot someone out the door. I think we all agree that it can be really beneficial, like Keith's example.
Perfect. Do you think this manager can make good decisions about these 2 individuals, or does she seem to be influenced by the biases that will be hard to overcome?
I think she's already gotten in the fight, hasn't she? She's already saying that she's willing to give them a 2.5. She's already contemplating the idea of a PIP. I think that obviously everything going on with Phil is hard, but the fact that she's already contemplated the scores that they need to be given shows that she can make good decisions about it.
Okay.
What about you guys?
I agree.
I don't know. I think if these guys actually had a chance to turn around, I think she'd be hard pressed to rally behind him. Like if Phil dug in and started doing twice his work and there was a place that he could be useful that would be that 100% useful to her department, I don't know that she could fully rally around him. She probably could, but with Terry, I doubt that she could get behind him at all.
Right.
Even
Yeah.
if he doubled his work? I guess that would still be 0, right? 0
Yeah,
to
0 times 2 would say 0, yeah.
Sorry, math humor.
Sorry. Oh my goodness. Okay. Next is I want all of you guys to commit to a decision about what the manager should do with respect to Phil and Terry. So either fire them, do something else, make a decision, and stick with it. Just
I
let it
think
run.
we all already decided we want pips that are constructive, right? Is that what we all decided?
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe some educational opportunities.
So
Maybe
first we're
some
going to talk about.
transfers.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good.
So first we're going to talk about Terry, and they want to know what are some of the alternatives we think, um, instead of firing Terry, that we can do.
Let's do the condensed version of this conversation since we've already really talked about it. Can I
Okay.
can I motion for that? Can I get an aye or a nay?
Aye.
Yeah.
So if we've literally already talked about it, I think it can be implied that we're is better than the outline and that we
Okay.
get this.
Next, we're going to read um, Dismissing Employees Part 2.
So you have to do that, I think, because you're the leader. Or can we all just go ahead and put it in with the password?
It says
Doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
we can all do it.
Okay, cool.
I can give you a condensed version if you want.
Yes,
Go for
Sure.
it.
please.
It was Reader's Digest.
She went ahead and gave Terry a 2.5, and she said these are the type of people we're hiring, and what comes next is a PIP, and she said at that point we can pretty much let you go at any time. Do you want to constantly be living on the edge? And he said, and then she said, if we have to give you a PIP, if you are fired, we will escort you from the premises. And she was like, "Is that really the way you want to go out?" And Terry was like, "Nope, that's not how I want to go out." So I think they let him go, or he decided that
You let
He
them go.
volunteered to leave.
yeah, he
Yes.
volunteered to leave with his head up, head held high. So that was nice. And then if they would have let Phil go, it would have looked like they had fired him because he had been sick for so long. So they tried to. I think they said they tried to find him a place in the company, and I think he eventually decided to leave the company after they moved him, and he ended up dying
Oh.
Aw.
of cancer. But yeah, so they said that she continued to be friends with him, but yeah, he died not long after he was diagnosed with inoperable brain cancer.
Oh my gosh. That's
Yeah.
awful.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. How do they get these case studies? Like, that can't be like a real situation. Like, someone morbidly wrote that.
Yeah.
Can just be hit by a car and it was an accident. Now we're gonna make it a brain tumor.
Okay.
Well, thank you,
Wow.
though, for the synopsis. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Sorry, we need to end it on a high note.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, what do you think that the manager did well in that situation?
I like that he was transferred. That was my idea from the
Yeah.
beginning, even
I
if
was
it didn't
thinking
work
that
out
was
very well.
like the most glorious thing.
It's a bummer that he didn't like it.
I think she
And
handled it really well, actually.
Yeah.
Even when it comes to Terry, like she gave him the option. You can try the PIP, or you can decide to go, whichever you decide. And giving him the option is better than saying, "Yeah, I fired him." And it gave
Yeah.
him an opportunity to walk out of there not feeling so badly. I mean, I feel like either way, he was going to lose his position either way, probably.
And at least she tried. Like, she really did try to help them. I mean, even with moving Phil to another department, like, It just shows that she actually cared.
I agree that Terry needed to go, and I like that she did it covering her own bases, and that it ended up being his decision, and so it didn't reflect so poorly on her that she booted out their friend or whatever. But I also feel like they're still not using the PIP correctly. Like, you can't use that as a way to scare somebody into quitting, you know? Like, once I get this to you, I can fire you whenever I want, and it's going to be embarrassing because I will have you escorted out. Like, you know what I mean? Like, effective because we didn't like this guy, but still not using PIP. So for the next few questions, I think that kind of goes over what I like, that she covered her bases and it didn't make it seem like she beat up on this guy's friend, at least from their perspective, unless Terry recants that she threatened me with a PIP and said I would be escorted. Probably wouldn't help her in those circles either, but the PIP still just it's not being used the way
It's
we
used as a weapon. It's not a tool, it's a weapon. So
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
Well, you just covered the next couple questions, so now we're just gonna go. What do you guys think about the case? What did you learn from it?
The right way to use a PIP.
Yes.
The right way to use a PIP, and the definition of at will. You know, I think that the right to work state and at will state, I think that, because that's always been really hazy for me in my mind, is, you know, what that means, and so to actually see the definitions in black and white. Granted, there's a lot of gray areas in the middle, but at least to have a broad sweeping definition of what it is pretty helpful.
Yeah. I also feel like it really shows the importance of the hiring process and interviewing. I feel like it's really expensive to be the interview process itself, training, the turnover rate, having to replace them and train somebody else. If you just do it right the first time, and it's different like when people are leaving you for career advancement or other opportunities, but it's way different when you're like, okay, we've been putting up with you for 6 years or however many years, and you haven't contributed, and we've been paying you like you've been contributing. You know, like it's a very expensive mistake, and one that if we have any influence on in the interview process, we need to be more selective and have the interview process as a tool to get the people we want. Sorry. That's my rampage.
That's good. Nice rampage.
Thanks.
And then the last thing that we need to talk about is just and how we can apply it to our future.
I just did that.
Yeah,
Okay.
good job, Victoria.
Yahoo!
Sorry, I'm gonna end the broadcast for right now. So thanks for tuning in to Group 6.
Woohoo!